Have you ever wondered how one simple gesture could change someone's life forever? A single moment, an unexpected opportunity that alters the course of everything? Imagine the weight of your responsibilities, your children depending on you, bills piling up, dreams fading into the background because survival takes every ounce of energy. Now, what if someone, a complete stranger, offered you a chance to rewrite that story? What if their kindness sparked a transformation that not only changed your life, but your child's future as well? This is the incredible journey of a woman who, despite every obstacle, refused to let her circumstances define her. Meet Sarah, a single mother, juggling more than most could ever imagine. By day, she works tirelessly at a job that barely covers the bills. By night, she's a caregiver, a teacher, and a protector to her young child, doing everything in her power to create a future they both deserve. Sarah's story is one of endless effort, sacrifice, and the quiet, often invisible battles of single motherhood. But like so many others in similar situations, Sarah's dreams of a better life, of better opportunities for herself and her child, seem out of reach. Her dream of furthering her education, of stepping into a career that would provide financial stability and personal fulfillment, feels like a distant hope. Every time she thinks about going back to school, there's always something standing in her way: money, time, childcare, energy. The path forward seems impossible. But what if, in the face of all this, there was one thing that could break through the barriers she's facing? What if one person, one kind soul, believed in her and gave her the chance she never thought she'd have? Sarah's life was about to change in a way she could never have imagined. This is a story about more than just hardship. It's a story of hope. It's a story about the life-changing power of education and how a single opportunity, an unexpected scholarship, can open doors to a future that once felt out of reach. It's about a mother who learned that no dream is too big and no challenge is too great when there's the right opportunity at the right time. So, stay with us. In the next few moments, you'll hear how one gesture, from a generous donor, became the key to unlocking an entirely new life for Sarah and her child. It's a story that might just leave you asking yourself, what simple thing could I do today to change someone's life forever? Sarah woke up to the sound of her alarm clock blaring at 5:30 a.m. The morning light hadn't yet broken through the curtains, but the day had already begun. She rolled out of bed, still exhausted from the night before. The little sleep she managed to get had been broken by the familiar sounds of her child stirring in the next room. Her daughter, Emma, was only 8 years old, and even though Sarah had tried to instill a sense of independence in her, mornings were always a scramble. There wasn't a moment to spare. Sarah quickly got dressed in the worn-out uniform that barely fit her anymore, one of the few items she could afford after paying for groceries and rent. She had planned a shower, but the clock was ticking, and she didn't have time for self-care today. Instead, she brushed her hair in front of the bathroom mirror, a reflection of a woman who was too tired to look her best, but who had to keep moving. Emma was already awake, her clothes laid out by the bed, her backpack ready. She was a good kid, understanding that her mother's work was never done. In the kitchen, Sarah made a quick breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, and a cup of coffee. It was a routine that had become second nature. Rush through the morning chores, get Emma ready for school, and pray she wouldn't be late to her second job. They both knew that Sarah's work wasn't just about providing, it was about surviving. By 7 a.m., they were out the door. Sarah walked Emma to the school bus stop, offering her a quick kiss on the cheek before watching her climb aboard. The bus pulled away, and Sarah turned toward the bus stop, where the route to her first job awaited. It was the same day-after-day routine. Work at a local diner for minimum wage, slinging coffee and sandwiches to regulars who barely noticed her presence. The tips were meager, the hours long, and the weariness in her body was evident even before she clocked in. Every day, Sarah gave her all to a job that didn't even offer health insurance, let alone a chance at advancement. Her co-workers, many of them in the same situation as she was, offered her sympathetic smiles and exchanged tired jokes to keep the monotony from becoming unbearable. But underneath it all, the weight of her reality pressed down harder each day. There was never enough time, never enough money, never enough energy to meet all the demands of being a single mother. By 3 p.m., She was done with her shift at the diner. But her day wasn't over. She had a few hours to rest, but rest was something she hadn't known in years. The house needed cleaning, laundry, dishes, dusting. While the bills sat on the kitchen table, staring at her. She hadn't opened them yet. She couldn't afford to. The electricity bill had already been threatening to be cut off, and she was praying she could make it to the next paycheck. She'd already borrowed money from her sister, who also had her own family to care for. It was a constant cycle of borrowing, repaying, and never really getting ahead. Sarah didn't have time for a break. By 6 p.m., she was heading to her second job, cleaning office buildings. Another long shift ahead. Her hands ached from scrubbing. Her feet burned from standing for hours on end. Her mind, already tired, struggled to focus on the simple tasks of vacuuming and wiping down desks. She thought of Emma, alone at home. But Emma was a trooper. She had learned to entertain herself, do her own homework, and help out around the house. She understood that her mom was doing everything she could to keep them afloat. When Sarah finally crawled into bed at 11 p.m., she felt like she had just enough time to close her eyes before the alarm would ring again in a few hours. There was no time for anything else, no time for dreams, no time for aspirations. There was only the relentless grind of survival. She wondered, late at night, if things would ever change. Would she ever get a chance to go back to school? Would she ever be able to provide Emma with the future she dreamed of? The future that didn't involve struggling just to make ends meet? But when Sarah allowed herself to think about her dreams, it was always accompanied by a sense of guilt. There was no time to dream. She had to focus on the immediate needs of her child, her job, and the bills that threatened to swallow them whole. She dreamed of a better life for Emma, a life where her daughter could go to college, where she could have options and opportunities. But that dream felt so far away, like an unreachable star in a sky that seemed too vast to ever cross. Society had its own judgments, too. People looked at Sarah and saw a mother struggling to keep it together, but they didn't see the whole picture. They didn't know about the constant pressure to prove she was doing enough, that she was a good enough mother. There was always the lingering fear of judgment. She wasn't perfect. She had moments when she was too tired to engage with Emma the way she wanted to, or when she felt like a failure because she couldn't give her daughter the things other parents could. Sometimes, she felt isolated in her struggles, like she was alone in the fight. And yet, despite all this, Sarah kept going. She didn't have a choice. Her love for Emma, her desire to give her a better life, pushed her through the hardest of days. She might have been exhausted, overworked, and stretched thin, but Sarah refused to give up. Because, for her, the most important thing was that Emma knew she was loved, and that, no matter how tough things got, her mom would always do whatever it took to keep their small family afloat. The idea of pursuing her own education seemed like a luxury. How could she think about school when the rent was due? How could she afford to take classes when she was barely scraping by as it was? And yet, deep inside, Sarah couldn't help but imagine a life where she wasn't just surviving, but thriving, where education opened doors to a career, to a better home, to a brighter future for Emma. But for now, those dreams seemed as far out of reach as the stars. Sarah wiped her tears away, knowing that her dreams could wait. Right now, her focus was her child, her work, and making sure they both survived another day. But she couldn't help but hold on to that tiny spark of hope, that one day, something might change. That one day, things might be different. And until that day came, she would keep fighting, because that was all she could do. Sarah had always believed in the power of education. It was something her mother had instilled in her from a young age. Education is the key to a better life, she would say. Those words had been her guiding principle for years, and even now, as a mother herself, they echoed in her mind. But as much as she cherished that belief, the reality of her life as a single mother made it feel like an unattainable dream. In the quiet moments between the chaos of her daily routine, Sarah would often find herself daydreaming about what it might be like to have a real career, to work a job that didn't just pay the bills but allowed her to thrive. She would imagine herself in a classroom, learning something new, perhaps a trade or skill that would open doors for her family. The thought was intoxicating, the idea of not just surviving, but actually succeeding, of being able to provide Emma with a future full of possibilities, not just the same struggles that Sarah had known her whole life. But those dreams felt so distant. Education seemed like a faraway place, something reserved for people who had the luxury of time and money, neither of which Sarah had. She thought about how much she had sacrificed to keep her family afloat. There was never enough money to spare for anything beyond the essentials: rent, food, utilities. Even a community college class seemed impossible when tuition alone was out of her reach. The application fees, the books, the transportation. Everything seemed designed to keep people like her out of higher education, as if the system was set up to exclude those who needed it the most. She thought about it constantly, though. When Emma was at school, when she was washing dishes or cleaning offices, Sarah's mind would wander. What if she could go to school part-time? What if she could take evening classes after her shifts? But there was always something that held her back. The nagging worry that it wasn't possible. The fear that it would only make things worse, that it would take even more time away from Emma, or that she would fall further behind financially. How could she juggle school with everything else? How could she balance being a mother, working long hours, and still pursue her own dreams? There was no clear answer. One of her biggest concerns was Emma. She wanted to be there for her daughter, especially as Emma was growing older and needed more of her attention. They were a team, just the two of them. Sarah had always felt that it was her responsibility to be present for Emma, helping with homework, listening to her problems, teaching her life lessons. Could she give up time with her daughter to attend school? What kind of mother would she be if she wasn't there to support Emma fully? At times, Sarah felt torn between two worlds: the desire to improve her own life and the need to be fully present for Emma. She couldn't help but wonder if Emma would resent her for choosing education over spending more time with her. After all, Emma was still a child. She didn't understand why her mother worked 2 jobs, or why Sarah was so tired all the time. Emma just wanted her mother's attention and love. But the weight of Sarah's own dreams, the hope that education could unlock a better life for them both, was heavy on her heart. The idea of enrolling in school was daunting. Sarah had never been particularly confident in her academic abilities. Her high school years had been a blur of stress, part-time jobs, and just trying to make it through. She had never had the chance to attend college, and the idea of returning as an adult felt intimidating. She worried that she was too old, too far behind, and that she wouldn't be able to keep up. How could she compete with younger students who had no responsibilities weighing them down? Could she really handle homework, tests, and essays while managing her work and caring for Emma? But still, there was a part of her that knew deep down that education was the key. If she could find a way to make it work, it would change everything. She could get a better job, one that paid more, one with benefits, one that allowed her to live a life beyond the confines of survival. Maybe she could even find a career that she loved, something that ignited her passions. But the cost of that dream was steep. She needed a flexible schedule, perhaps scholarships or financial aid, and an immense amount of determination. It wasn't just about tuition. It was about finding a way to carve out time, to find the energy, and to hold on to the hope that it would all pay off in the end. Sarah had talked to a few people who had managed to go back to school as adults. They told her it was possible, but that it required sacrifices. They spoke about late nights, about working through weekends, about the mental and physical toll it took on their families. But they also spoke about the rewards, the pride of achieving something for themselves, the ability to give their children a better life, and the confidence that comes from proving to yourself that you can do hard things. One evening, as Sarah was tucking Emma into bed, she whispered a promise to her daughter. "One day, Emma," she said, "Mom is going to go back to school. I'm going to make our lives better. I'm going to show you that we don't have to stay stuck. I'll work hard, but I won't give up on my dreams. I promise you that." Emma smiled up at her, a hopeful look in her eyes. "I believe you, Mom," she said softly. Those words were enough to ignite something inside Sarah. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a goal. She didn't know how she would make it happen, but she knew she had to try. For Emma, for herself, for their future. And so, Sarah began looking into schools, searching for any program that might fit her schedule. She gathered information on financial aid, scholarships, and online courses. It wasn't going to be easy, and there were many hurdles ahead. But Sarah had never backed down from a challenge before. If anything, the difficulties she had faced in life had only made her stronger. She was determined that, this time, the dream of education would not be out of reach. One evening, as Sarah was closing up the small office where she worked late into the night, a colleague she barely knew struck up a conversation. Her name was Lisa, a woman who had been working at the company for a few years and always seemed to have her life together. They exchanged pleasantries as Sarah packed her things, but then Lisa casually mentioned something that caught Sarah off guard. "You know," Lisa said, "I recently applied for a scholarship to further my education, and I think you should look into it too. They give out grants for single mothers who are working full-time but want to go back to school. I'm not sure about the details, but it could really help with tuition and other costs." The words seemed to hang in the air, and for a moment, Sarah simply stared at Lisa, unable to process what she had just heard. A scholarship for single mothers? Working full-time? It felt like a distant dream, something out of reach, a lifeline that only existed in the stories of other people. Sarah was no stranger to hard work, but the thought of someone else offering her a chance to go to school without having to sacrifice everything else in her life was almost too good to be true. The skepticism bubbled up almost instantly. "That sounds amazing," Sarah replied, trying to sound casual. "But I don't know. Scholarships for people like me don't exactly grow on trees, do they?" Lisa smiled softly, almost knowingly, and shrugged. "You'd be surprised. There are organizations out there that really want to help people like us. Just look into it. It could change everything." For the rest of the night, the words played on repeat in Sarah's mind. She couldn't shake the thought of a scholarship. Could this really be real? Could there really be an opportunity out there for her? It seemed almost too easy. The doubts crept in. What's the catch? Why would they help someone like me? What if I don't qualify? Sarah was used to the idea that anything worth having came with a heavy price, and this seemed like it could be one of those too good to be true offers. Still, there was something about Lisa's casual mention of it that gnawed at Sarah's conscience. This was a path, however faint, that might offer her the opportunity to make her dreams a reality. But how could she even begin to process the idea of applying? What if she wasn't accepted? What if the whole process turned out to be more complicated and stressful than it was worth? The next few days were filled with internal conflict. On one hand, Sarah knew that she couldn't ignore this possible lifeline. If there was even the slightest chance this scholarship could provide the opportunity she had been yearning for, she had to investigate further. On the other hand, there were 100 reasons why it could fall apart. What if it was too competitive? What if the application process took too long? What if she had to give up too much time with Emma, trying to meet the scholarship's demanding requirements? And then, there were the consequences for her family. Sarah was acutely aware of how little time she had for herself as it was. Between her 2 jobs, the housework, the grocery shopping, and the endless stream of errands, there was no margin for error. If she applied for this scholarship, it would take time she didn't have. Emma might have to fend for herself a little more, and Sarah couldn't bear the thought of missing out on time with her daughter. Emma was her anchor, the reason Sarah had fought so hard for so long. What would Emma think of her choosing to pursue this scholarship? Would it make their lives better, or would it push them further apart? The more Sarah thought about it, the more the possibilities weighed on her mind. On one hand, this scholarship could open doors to a future she had always dreamed of, a career, stability, and the chance to give Emma a life free from the constant cycle of financial struggle. On the other hand, it felt like a gamble, a risk that might not pay off. The fear of failure loomed large in her mind. What if this scholarship only made things worse? What if she failed to meet expectations and ended up wasting the opportunity? She couldn't shake the feeling that this might be her one shot. It was the first time in years that something felt like a chance, not just a distant possibility. Sarah had worked hard for everything she had, but she had never been handed an opportunity like this. A chance to get an education, to better herself, to rise above the circumstances she had always known. And yet, as with everything else in her life, it would require sacrifice. On the day she decided to take the first step, Sarah sat down with her laptop and started researching the scholarship Lisa had mentioned. Her hands shook slightly as she scrolled through the website, reading about the eligibility requirements, the process, and the possible impact it could have. As she filled out the application form, a mix of excitement and fear flooded her chest. She knew this wasn't just about her. It was about giving Emma a better life, one where she didn't have to worry about bills, food, and the constant grind. As Sarah submitted her application, she allowed herself a quiet moment of hope. It wasn't guaranteed that she would get the scholarship, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had something to look forward to, something that could change her future. The possibility was there, just waiting for her to take that step. She closed her laptop and sat back in her chair, staring at the screen as the weight of what she had just done began to settle in. This wasn't just an application. It was a glimmer of hope, a seed that, with time, could grow into something life-changing. Would it be enough? Would she be chosen? Only time would tell. But Sarah had taken the first step toward transforming her life. For Emma, for herself, and for the future that now seemed just a little bit closer. The days after Sarah had clicked the submit button felt like an eternity. Each morning she woke up with a knot in her stomach, reminding herself that there was no turning back now. The hope that the scholarship could change everything had begun to feel like a distant dream again, as the weight of her daily life settled back in. But this time, there was something different, something that had shifted inside her. There was a flicker of possibility, a sliver of hope that refused to fade away, even amid the chaos of her routine. Sarah knew that the application process wouldn't be easy. In fact, she had been mentally preparing for the amount of work that would be required. There would be essays to write, forms to complete, and proof of her qualifications to submit. What she hadn't anticipated was how deeply personal the process would be. This wasn't just a matter of filling out some paperwork. It was about telling her story, laying bare the struggles she had faced as a single mother, and putting her aspirations on paper. It was about explaining who she was, where she came from, and why she deserved this chance. And though it was daunting, it also felt strangely liberating. The first step was research. Sarah spent long nights after Emma had gone to bed, scrolling through scholarship websites, reading the fine print, and trying to understand the eligibility requirements for each one. Each new piece of information made her feel more overwhelmed than the last. There were so many options, but most of them had conditions that didn't fit her life. Some were for women returning to school after a certain number of years in the workforce. Others required a minimum GPA from the past several semesters, something Sarah had long left behind in her earlier days. She felt like an outsider in a world that was supposed to be for people just like her, but she refused to give up. As she waded through the maze of information, Sarah stumbled upon a scholarship that seemed to check all the right boxes. It was specifically for single mothers, and it didn't require a perfect academic record, just a compelling story of why the applicant deserved a chance. She had that. She had more than enough of that. The next step was writing the application essay. Sarah sat down one night with a cup of coffee, staring at the blank page in front of her. She had no idea where to start. The pressure of putting her life into words felt suffocating. How do you condense years of struggle and sacrifice into a few paragraphs that would somehow capture the attention of a committee? She began with the basics, her background, her job, her life as a mother. But as she kept writing, she found herself unraveling more than just the surface details. She wrote about the sleepless nights, the missed birthdays, the way she had stretched her paycheck every month just to keep food on the table. She wrote about how hard it was to explain to Emma why there were no gifts for Christmas, or why they couldn't go on the vacations other families seemed to take for granted. And then, she wrote about her dreams for Emma, dreams that seemed so far away, yet were at the core of everything she did. Emma deserves better than this, Sarah wrote in one of the paragraphs. She deserves to grow up without knowing what it feels like to worry about where the next meal will come from. She deserves a future filled with opportunities, and I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. Tears welled up in her eyes as she typed. The words seemed to spill out of her heart, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like her story mattered. But then, just as quickly, doubt crept in. Is this enough? She thought, staring at the screen. Am I enough? She reread her essay, her fingers trembling slightly as she scanned the words. The self-doubt hit her like a wave. What if her story wasn't compelling enough? What if the committee didn't care about her struggles? What if, after all this effort, she was simply not good enough? The uncertainty was paralyzing. But after a deep breath, Sarah decided to trust her story, to trust herself. She hit the submit button, her heart racing. In that moment, she knew there was no turning back. She had poured her soul into the application. If that wasn't enough, then nothing else would be. But the application process didn't end there. As the days passed, Sarah continued to juggle her responsibilities. During the day, she worked long hours at the diner, serving meals to customers who barely noticed her. Evenings were spent helping Emma with homework, making dinner, and tidying up the house. The usual exhaustion weighed heavily on her, but in the back of her mind, the scholarship process continued to linger. There were moments when she wondered if it would all be worth it. Would she really be able to manage the workload of school while still taking care of Emma and working full-time? Would the scholarship be the miracle she was hoping for? Or would she end up disappointed, yet again, with nothing to show for her efforts? One night, as she sat at the kitchen table filling out yet another form, this time to provide financial documentation, Sarah's thoughts wandered. What if I don't get this? What if I'm just not cut out for something like this? But she shook off the doubt. It had been a long time since she had allowed herself to quit on anything. Sarah was determined to see this through. She had faced every challenge head-on, from the moment she had learned she was pregnant with Emma to the days when she had barely scraped by with the rent. She wasn't about to let fear stop her now. Not when she had already come this far. And then there were the moments when she felt a strange sense of peace, knowing that she had done everything she could. When she thought about Emma, her face lighting up every time she came home, Sarah couldn't help but believe that this scholarship wasn't just for her. It was for both of them. It was a chance to change their future, to break free from the cycle that had defined so much of their lives. As Sarah sat there at the table, filling out the final details of the application, she whispered softly, "This is for you, Emma, for you and me both." And with that, she hit the submit button once more, hoping that this time, her story would be enough to change their lives forever. As the days passed and life continued its relentless pace, the scholarship application remained in the back of her mind. She'd sent it off, unsure of what the future held but hoping for a miracle. And then, out of the blue, the phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, a call that would change her life. The voice on the other end was warm and calm, but there was something in it that carried an air of authority, someone who had seen both the highs and lows of life. "I'm calling about your scholarship application," the voice began. Her heart skipped a beat. She had been so wrapped up in the endless cycle of life that she hadn't expected anything more than silence. But here it was, an answer. The voice belonged to a donor, a successful individual who had made a name for themselves in business. But behind the polished exterior, there was a history of struggle, of moments where everything seemed impossible. This donor had risen from humble beginnings, having grown up in a small town, where opportunities were scarce and every day felt like an uphill battle. They knew what it was like to feel alone, to be weighed down by the fear that no matter how hard you worked, you might not ever catch a break. The donor had built their life from the ground up. The path had been anything but easy. They had faced their own hurdles, financial struggles, academic challenges, and the weight of responsibility. But each setback had only pushed them harder, propelling them forward in the pursuit of success. And now, in their own success, they felt an overwhelming desire to give back, to help others overcome the same barriers they once faced. They understood the power of education, the way it could break cycles of poverty and offer hope where there was none. It was this very belief that inspired the creation of their scholarship program, a way to give deserving individuals, particularly single mothers, a chance to rewrite their stories. When the donor first reviewed the applications, they had been flooded with countless submissions, each one telling a tale of hardship, determination, and hope. But one story stood out, a story of a mother who, despite her exhaustion, her doubts, and her overwhelming responsibilities, was still holding on to the dream of a better life for herself and her child. There was something raw and authentic about her application, something that resonated deeply with the donor. Perhaps it was the unwavering love she had for her child, or the strength she showed in the face of insurmountable odds. Or maybe it was the way she painted a picture of a future where education could change everything, not just for her, but for her family as well. The donor recognized that same spark in the mother's story, the same resilience that had driven them to push forward, to create a life they never thought possible. The donor's eyes had scanned countless applications, but when they came across this one, they saw more than just words on a page. They saw their own past mirrored in the mother's struggles. They saw the single mother who worked tirelessly to make ends meet, just as they had once done. And it was that connection that led to their decision to offer the scholarship to her, knowing that this was an opportunity that could truly change everything. The moment the mother received the call, her world seemed to pause. The words on the other end of the line blurred into a surreal echo as the reality began to sink in. She had been chosen. She had been selected for the scholarship. She couldn't believe it, couldn't understand how it had happened. But there it was, an answer to everything she had hoped for. It felt too good to be true, a chance she had never imagined would come. But as the donor continued to speak, explaining the details of the scholarship and how it could help her pursue her education, everything else faded away. In that moment, all the stress, all the exhaustion, all the sacrifices, it all seemed to dissipate. The donor didn't just see her struggles, they saw her potential. They saw the possibility of a better life for her and her child, a future where education could be the key to unlocking opportunities she had only dreamed of. They saw the dream that had been buried beneath years of hardship, and they believed in it. For the single mother, the unexpected donor wasn't just someone offering financial help, they were a lifeline. They were a symbol of hope, proof that there were people out there who understood, who cared, and who were willing to extend a hand to those in need. This scholarship wasn't just a financial gift, it was a turning point, a moment that would forever shape the future of this mother and her child. And as the phone call ended, the single mother sat back, overwhelmed with emotion. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight on her shoulders lift, replaced by a sense of possibility. This wasn't just about education anymore. This was about a new chapter in her life, one filled with hope, opportunity, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The donor's story had come full circle. They had given not just a scholarship, but a chance at life. And in doing so, they had changed the course of a family's future, just as someone had once done for them. The days that followed the scholarship application submission felt like they were dragging on endlessly. It was as if the weight of her responsibilities grew heavier with every passing hour. The single mother moved through her daily routine in a blur, rushing to get her child ready for school, managing her low-paying job that demanded more than she could give, and handling the unrelenting housework that piled up with each passing day. There was no time to think, no time to breathe. Her body was tired, her mind constantly running through the lists of things that needed to be done. Her heart, though, carried a glimmer of hope, a quiet, fragile hope that perhaps, just maybe, something would change. She had learned to live with uncertainty. She knew that life was a constant battle to keep things afloat, a series of sacrifices, compromises, and moments of doubt. Yet, in the stillness of the night, she would close her eyes and imagine a life where education was within her reach, where she could give her child a future filled with opportunities. It was a dream she clung to, even though it seemed almost impossible. That morning, like every other, she woke up to the sound of her alarm ringing. She pulled herself out of bed, fatigue hanging over her like a weight. She had just enough time to make breakfast, pack lunches, and get her child off to school before heading to her job. It felt like the same routine, the same grind. As she put on her coat and headed out the door, she reminded herself to keep moving forward, to stay strong for her child. The thought of the scholarship was far from her mind. After all, she had done everything she could. There was no point in expecting anything to come from it. It was during a rare moment of quiet at work, while she was on a break, sitting in the corner of the break room, that the phone rang. The ringtone seemed too loud in the otherwise empty space, breaking through the haze of exhaustion. She glanced at the screen, surprised to see a number she didn't recognize. For a moment, she hesitated, the weight of her daily responsibilities clouding her judgment. But something inside her urged her to answer. Hello? A voice on the other end of the line spoke her name gently, and her heart skipped a beat. It was a calm, reassuring voice, and there was a moment of silence before the words came. I'm calling to let you know that you've been selected for the scholarship. The world seemed to pause. Her breath caught in her throat, and she felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. What? She asked, barely able to believe what she was hearing. I got it. Yes, the voice said with warmth. You've been chosen for the scholarship. You're going to receive the funding you need to pursue your education. The words hung in the air, echoing in her mind. A scholarship? For her? It felt like a dream, something too good to be true. But the voice on the other end was steady, confirming what she could hardly grasp. She had been chosen. She had been given a chance. The weight of the moment hit her all at once, and before she could respond, tears began to well up in her eyes. She couldn't speak. All the exhaustion, the struggles, the doubts, everything she had carried for so long, seemed to lift in an instant. It was as though the world had suddenly opened up, offering her a future she had only imagined in her quietest moments. "Are you okay?" the voice asked, sensing her silence. She wiped away a tear, her voice barely a whisper. I can't believe this. Thank you. Thank you so much." Her chest felt tight with emotion. Gratitude, shock, relief. It all flooded her at once, and she could hardly contain it. She had dreamed of this day for so long, but now that it was real, it felt overwhelming. This wasn't just about the scholarship, it was about everything it represented. It was a chance to escape the cycle she had been stuck in for years. It was the possibility of a new future, not just for her, but for her child. A chance to show them that dreams could come true, that hard work and determination could lead to something more. As the phone call ended, she sat there in stunned silence for a few moments, trying to process what had just happened. It was almost too much to take in. She had been chosen. Her future was no longer a distant hope. It was a tangible reality. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to feel the weight lift off her shoulders. She had the opportunity to change her life, to build a future filled with possibility. The ripple effect of that moment didn't just end with the phone call. It was as if the world had shifted, and with it, her entire perspective. The exhaustion she had been carrying, the sense of helplessness, began to fade. The doubt and uncertainty that had once clouded her mind now gave way to clarity. She could see her path ahead, a clear route that led to something greater. She could see her child's future, bright with the promise of opportunities she had never had. In the days that followed, her mindset shifted. The scholarship wasn't just a financial opportunity. It was a symbol of hope, of the belief that everything she had worked for, every sacrifice she had made, had not been in vain. Her goals no longer seemed out of reach. They were within her grasp. The dream of a better life for herself and her child wasn't a far-off fantasy anymore. It was real, and it was waiting for her. The life-changing phone call had ignited something inside her, a new fire, a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just a single mother struggling to survive. She was a woman on the cusp of transformation, ready to take on whatever came next. And with that scholarship, she knew she could not only change her own life, but also set an example for her child that dreams could indeed come true. The days that followed the phone call marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. At first, it felt surreal, almost like she was living someone else's story. But she soon realized that her world had irrevocably shifted. The scholarship was not just a financial lifeline. It was a chance to build a future, to break free from the limitations that had once defined her life. Balancing school with her responsibilities was a constant juggle. She had always been good at multitasking, but now, every moment of her day was accounted for. Her mornings were spent with her child, getting them ready for school, making sure they were settled before heading to her own classes. The late evenings were reserved for assignments, studying, and then the inevitable household chores. Every night, exhaustion threatened to pull her under, but the thought of the life she was building for her child kept her going. She faced countless challenges in this new chapter. There were days when she was overwhelmed, where the weight of managing everything seemed too much. Deadlines loomed like mountains, and sometimes, she felt like she was failing to meet them all. Her academic papers were. Her child, now becoming more accustomed to the hustle, began to pitch in, eager to help out around the house. It wasn't easy. There were times when she doubted herself, questioning whether she had the strength to continue. Would the exhaustion ever end? Would she ever find time for herself again? But with every obstacle, she found a way to rise above it. Each success, no matter how small, became a building block. The dreams that once seemed distant were now becoming tangible goals. And through it all, she was never truly alone. Her community, her friends, and even her family rallied around her. Her mother took care of her child whenever classes ran late, her neighbors pitched in with grocery runs, and the occasional meal shared with a friend provided not just sustenance but also a reminder that she wasn't isolated in her journey. The support was a steady stream that kept her grounded, especially when the pressure mounted. The donor, who had made all of this possible, became a silent yet powerful force in her life. Occasionally, there would be a note or a message of encouragement, words that kept her focused on the bigger picture. These reminders of the scholarship's true purpose were more than just financial aid. They were a beacon of hope, a reminder that someone believed in her potential. The donor's story, too, was a testament to overcoming adversity and knowing that someone with such a past was rooting for her added weight to her determination. Her child, watching her mother push through the daily grind, began to understand the power of education and hard work. In many ways, this journey wasn't just about her own transformation. It was about setting an example for her child. She showed them that dreams, no matter how far-fetched they seemed, were within reach with perseverance, sacrifice, and a belief that better days were ahead. Slowly but surely, she saw changes, not just in her life but in her child's world too. They were becoming more independent, taking on their own challenges with the same tenacity their mother had shown. As she grew in her studies, so did her child's confidence in themselves. And this, more than anything, was what kept her going. This was the transformation she had dreamed of, the life she was building for herself, and the example she was setting for her child. She still had a long way to go, but every day felt like a step closer to her dreams. The hardships were still there, the struggles were real, but they were no longer insurmountable. With every challenge she faced, she knew that the life-changing opportunity she had been given was not just a chance for a better future for her, but for her child as well. The road ahead was still filled with obstacles, but now she faced them with the knowledge that she was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. As she sat back, reflecting on the journey she had undertaken, it all felt like a whirlwind. Just months ago, she had been overwhelmed by the weight of daily struggles, unsure of how she could balance it all, work, school, and raising her child. But now, as she looked at the life she was building, it was impossible not to feel a deep sense of gratitude. The scholarship had not just opened doors to a better career. It had changed the trajectory of her entire life and her child's future. The scholarship wasn't simply a financial opportunity. It was a lifeline that had given her the tools to build something more than just a job. It had given her the chance to build a career, to give her child a future filled with possibilities, and to show them that dreams don't have to remain out of reach. She had often wondered if a better life was possible, but now, she knew it was. In this quiet moment of reflection, her heart swelled with appreciation for the people who had supported her along the way. She thought of the donor, whose belief in her story and potential had ignited this change. To the donor, thank you. Your kindness didn't just change my life. It changed my child's future, and that's something I will carry with me forever. Your generosity was more than just a scholarship. It was a vote of confidence, a reminder that there are people in the world who believe in the power of hard work, perseverance, and hope. She also thought of the many others who had stood by her. Her family, her friends, the neighbors who had offered a hand when she was struggling. Without their unwavering support, she would not have had the strength to keep pushing forward. To all of them, she owed more than just words could express. To the other single mothers watching this, she wanted to say this: there is always hope. Life can be hard, and the challenges may seem insurmountable at times, but don't give up. Don't stop dreaming, because there are opportunities out there waiting for you, even when you feel like you've run out of options. Sometimes it's a small gesture, a scholarship, a kind word, or even the belief of someone who sees your potential that can change everything. She wasn't special because of what she had done. She was special because she had kept going when things seemed impossible. And so can you. She knew that her story wasn't just hers. It was the story of so many other single mothers, fathers, and caregivers who were fighting for a better future for their children. And for every one of them, she offered this: Keep going. Keep believing. The change you're waiting for might be just around the corner. As for her own journey, the future was no longer an uncertain fog. It was clear. She had learned to trust in herself, to pursue opportunities, and to never let go of the hope that things could get better. The road ahead was still filled with challenges, but now, she had the strength and the tools to face them. The lessons she had learned were ones she would carry with her forever, not just for herself, but for her child too. The best is yet to come. And for anyone watching, remember, your story isn't over. The future you're dreaming of is closer than you think. Just take that first step. The rest will follow. In this story, we've seen how one simple gesture, a scholarship, has the power to transform not just a life, but an entire future. A single mother, facing insurmountable challenges, found hope in an unexpected opportunity. Through determination and the belief in a better tomorrow, she was able to change the course of her life and her child's future. This story is a reminder that no matter where you are or what struggles you face, change is possible. It's easy to feel like your dreams are too far out of reach, but sometimes it only takes one moment, one act of kindness, to make all the difference. Now, I want to hear from you. What dreams do you hold on to? What obstacles are you facing in your own life? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going and support one another in our journeys. And if you believe, just like I do, that small acts of kindness can change the world, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Together, we can create a ripple effect of hope, encouragement, and transformation.